So, if you guys watched my 3-part review of Into the Spider-Verse, I have made a very bold statement and went on over just how the movie is an overrated piece of shit disguised as art. I have also stated that I am cool with the idea where Miles Morales is our main Spider-Man instead of Peter Parker. It just sucks at it. Then 2 years later, we have a video game called SpiderMan Miles Morales. The very first console video game where you play as, you guessed it, Miles Morales. I played the game, and wow. Not only is it a fun spin-off game, not only is it a great Miles Morales game, but it is a far better Miles Morales story than Into the Spider-Verse. And I do not think that this video game should have been DLC. When I finished the game, I enjoyed my time playing the video game. It's got a better story, much better characters, better setting, better pacing, better action, looks, and animation, and better jokes! It's like this game takes the issues that I've had with Into the Spider-Verse and fixes them for me. In terms of the Miles Morales aspect, of course. And yes, I am going to be comparing these two separate Miles Morales entries, and I'm going to explain why the game does a far better job than the Oscar-winning piece of shit. And hooray! I get to bash Into the Spider-Verse some more! Video game Peter Parker doesn't spend a whole lot of time in the game. And of course, there's only 1 or 2 issues that I've had with him. For starters, oh my god! What did they do to your face? Insomnia! Peter's face was fine! It didn't need to be fixed in the PS4 version! It wasn't broken! And somehow he looks even worse than Tom Holland! Why did you change it? Whose bright idea was this amazing? Anyway, if you watch the ending of the 2008 game, Miles gains powers and Peter pretty much reveals that he's Spider-Man on the spot. And throughout the DLC, especially the ending of the final one, you pretty much get the idea that Peter is showing Miles the ropes. Hell, when Peter Parker leaves, he puts in some kind of trading holograms that can be activated from the computer throughout the city, which doesn't make much sense. I mean, how in the hell could Peter pull off this salary of a freelance photographer? Did he dumpster dive or something? Some time has passed when Peter's been teaching Miles, but the friendship they share with each other feels very genuine, and it's very clear that they like each other. Now let's look at movie Peter Parker. He's the worst Peter Parker I've ever seen in my life! Okay, let's take this one step at a time. Now, my problem isn't the fact that he isn't voiced by Josh Keaton. I mean, PS4 Spidey wasn't voiced or played by Josh Keaton either. But it turned out all good in the end. So, what's the story with pathetic Parker? First, he buried his Aunt May. Okay, older Spidey. I can dig it. Plus, Aunt May died in the PS4 as well. Then, Peter and MJ divorced with Peter not wanting to have kids. So he cries in the bathtub, eats pizza all the time, and gains weight. He gets bitter and annoyed with Miles, claims teenagers are the worst, and when he teaches along with other spider people, they do absolutely horrible jobs and overpressures Miles with their teachings. There's the whole leap of faith thing, which the other Spider-Man movies never did, especially Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies. It's ultimately pointless if the other Spider people did a much better job teaching Miles. I'll get back to that later, don't worry. He decides to stay behind for the other Spider people to go home, which I'm pretty sure he's just wanted to insert triggering topic here. Peter awkwardly apologizes to Mary Jane even though it isn't his Mary Jane, so it means nothing more than a stupid joke with one of the most unfunny, mind-numbingly idiotic, worst scenes I have ever seen in my entire life! Miles tosses back that leap of faith bullshit at Parker, which now makes Peter Parker want to have kids with Mary Jane. What a horrible Parker character. Which, honestly, probably could have worked if it was Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. If it has a little bit of better writing and exposition, I'd be okay with it. But this isn't the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, is it? Nope! First off, he is an absolutely horrible teacher, and this Spider-Man is just completely out of character. Him not wanting to have kids? Dude, I've seen the Spider-Girl comics, especially with Mayday Parker. Peter Parker's Spider-Man there quits being Spider-Man due to losing a leg. So this automatically makes it inferior by comparison. And if he did want kids, but doesn't because he's afraid of putting them in danger, that doesn't stop him in the comics with Mayday, with Annie. So animated movie Parker, go home. Side note, bringing up Annie, can we have more of Mary Jane Spider-Man or Spider-Man stuff, please? Even better with the symbiote. Ultimate Cartoon did that. Thank you. Aside from the kid issue and the fact that he's an absolutely horrible teacher, he is just incredibly bitter and negative. There are many scenes which makes me think about Spider-Man 2 with Tobey having been struggling with balancing his superhero and normal life. But instead of losing jobs, relationship with his friends, and Kristen's stunt, and having the power shut off at the worst times, here he's just eating pizza, gaining weight, and crying in bathtubs. Not to mention, he's a lot more careless. And even if he did care about Miles and the others, his bitterness just completely overshadows everything. You know, for a movie that's all about building up the Miles Morales Spidey, with having Peter Parker as his teacher, his teachings just makes me think about how Po, the Kung Fu Panda, does a shitty job at teaching in Kung Fu Panda 3, which I would rather be watching right now. At least the shitty teachings played an important role on a much better purpose. Where's his jokes? Where's the one-liners? The Peter Parker I know has a tendency to make bad jokes in serious situations, and there's none of that. Plus, making the references to Tobey's Spider-Man even though it's not the same character? Fuck off, Sony! Boo-hoo! I don't want to have children even though other Peters are excited to have a kid, and now my wife and I are divorced. I'm in the tub crying in cold water, eating pizza, and being fat like a fat form. Boo-hoo-hoo! Easily the most pathetic and worst Peter Parker Spider-Man I have ever seen in my entire life. I'd rather be watching the 2017 Spidey cartoons. Hell, even Tom Holland's Spidey films. A few horrible things happened to Tom Spidey, and I said good. Maybe it's time for you to grow up, you bastard. But to enter the Spider-Verse, Peter? I just want him to die sometimes. I don't want him to grow or anything. I just want him to die. If MJ died, I would laugh at him and give a high five to the bad guys who killed her. Okay, let's move back to PlayStation Parker again. Now, the reason Peter left is because he's taking a working vacation with MJ. Peter Parker in this game taking a vacation. I pretty much have stated my problem with Spider-Man taking a vacation, and I said it's a bad thing. And for a while, I have always thought that it's a pathetic thing for Parker to do, and how it goes against the whole great power comes great responsibility thing. But shockingly, here in this game, it works! There are two reasons I can think of to why I think it works. Reason 1. Peter is taking a working vacation. MJ needs Peter's help somewhere outside of New York. Minor reason, but it's better than trying to work up the guts to ask Michelle out while everything backfires. God, the fucking high school and romance cliches just suck in Tom Holland movies. Reason 2. Peter is pretty much letting Miles go solo. This is a chance for Miles to be his own Spider-Man. New York's only Spider-Man. This is a game where Miles is being the substitute Spider-Man who's now on his own for the time being. This right here is a million times better than the Leap of Faith shit. It also helps that Parker has been an absolutely chill teacher. He's got the jokes, he's not bitter, he's not angry, he's not careless. And sometimes he gets concerned if he needs to come back if Miles needs him to do so. The worst problem I have with PlayStation Parker, aside from his sense of humor that doesn't hit bullseye sometimes, it's pretty much the face. What have you done, Insomniac? To those who think it's a good idea and accepted it, deserves to have bad things happen to you! I better shut up before it gets too far. The worst problem with animated movie Peter Parker is that he's a horrible teacher and is out of character. So yeah, PlayStation Parker. Superior Spider Miyagi. Prowler is a good one to start off with. In both versions, he is this one uncle who Miles looks up to, but his parents are not approving of Aaron, especially since he's a supervillain who works for money. And I will say, I don't really have that much problems with movie Aaron, aside from that godforsaken shoulder touch. But aside from that, well, I don't really hate him. I don't even dislike him either. He seems to be a cool guy. It does suck with the fact that he's a supervillain. But at least he loves Miles enough to not want to kill him when Miles does reveal himself. And it also sucks when he dies, until the movie ruins the dramatic scene after his death with another one of those jokes thrown into the middle. Seriously, has nobody ever pointed out how the dramatic scenes get botched with the joke thrown in? Also, the joke I found funny in the trailers, it has the worst mood whiplash I've ever seen in my life. It's even worse than the funny or upbeat TV commercials that plays after or during dramatic serious moments. So, movie Aaron's character doesn't suck. But it really isn't all that deep either. Plus there's the typical twist villain and shit that, well, I don't really care for. Video game Aaron has some more depth to him. And even though he and Jeff, Miles' father, had disagreements and parted ways, he still clearly loves his brother. And it plays a big role and ties with Miles' Spider-Man character in the game. And Jeff's death has a lot more role than Prowler's death in the movie. When Jeff sees Prowler is dead, he orders his man to go after Spider-Man, but in the end, it was all, so it's nothing more than a sad scene botched by joke in the middle. Something I like about this game is that they don't build up on the surprise or twist. As soon as the Tinkerer or Prowler show up, you see who they are in less than a minute instead of having to wait around 60 or 120 minutes for a twist. The most this game does is hint on Finn and Aaron might have done something off screen, but as soon as we see them, they rip the band-aid off in less than a minute. Prowler is concerned for Miles, enough to come out of retirement, and when shit gets real, he's a little bit more open with why he hasn't been involved in Miles lately. With Jefferson's death playing a much larger role, doesn't want Miles to risk his life even further, to the point where he fights Miles. But what he's doing is damaging the family even further. What makes Prowler's character much better is that he knows Miles much more deeply than in the movie, to the point where even Aaron can pick up that Miles is the substitute Spider-Man. He stopped his criminal activities some time ago, but when Miles started flying solo, he came out simply because he's trying to protect Miles. Hell, he even gives one of his gadgets to help out. But in doing so later on, he's just damaging their love for each other. What's even worse is that he can expose Roxanne and Simon, but then it would just land Davis in prison as well, and Simon knows how self-centered Davis is. Miles ends up taking his uncle down later on, and is pretty much done and angry with his uncle. But then, Aaron redeems himself by not only helping the civilians, but also exposing Simon. Movie Prowler, Uncle is a cool uncle Miles sees from time to time behind Daddy's back. He's also the Prowler in order to take down the spiders. Miles reveals himself, causing Davis to pause and step back, and he dies, which does not play a big role. Not really much to say there. Oh, except screw you for teaching Miles the stupid soldier touch! And also, I could have felt bad if it wasn't for the movie making a joke like 2 minutes after your death! This movie! Okay, so both the game and movie, Aaron has a pretty good connection with Miles. But video game Prowler is a character that has more to offer. He's pretty much a criminal, but he also loves and cares for his family. His biggest problem is how selfish he can be, of which he redeems himself. Also, he's a lot smarter to pick up that Miles is Spider-Man than he does in the movie. What about the rich assholes that causes a lot of problems? I mean, do I need to say anything? This Kingpin has the absolute worst villain design I've ever seen in my life. There's nothing more to say. What he looks like, which is absolute shit, describes everything else with movie Kingpin perfectly. Alright, a little more detail then. This Kingpin does multiverse stuff just to see his family again. And that pretty much describes how Kingpin is an absolute shit. But wait a minute! Ultimate Comics Kingpin has a wife, and movie Kingpin actually kills Spider-Man! Well, if the hash-slinging slasher killed Squidward and SpongeBob, I would give him much more credit than Kingpin killing Blondie Spider-Man. And for those of you who thinks that it's an insult to compare hash-slinging slasher with this movie's Kingpin, that's exactly what it is. An insult. This Kingpin is an insult. I shouldn't have to compare him with a SpongeBob character, but I am. That's how bad it is. And to the SpongeBob fans, I'm sorry. I really am. Kingpin using the multiverse to bring back his family is absolutely ridiculous, and the monster villains just soften Peter up. Enough said. Also, before you say anything about the Ultimate Comics, Ultimate delivered both Kingpin and Spidey's death a lot better. I prefer an OP Goblin being solo and Kingpin trying to bring his wife out of a coma over what the movie offers. So there, Ultimate Comics did better than the movie in a few areas, so shut up. Now, Simon Krieger, yes, I am aware that Fisk is in this game, but it's just a cameo for side missions who's behind bars. We're going with Simon because, just like the Kingpin, he's rich and does a lot of shady stuff behind the scenes. Also, PlayStation Kingpin is 1,000 times better than movie Kingpin, and doesn't look like a SpongeBob character. Simon has a new energy called New Form, which can power entire cities and is said that it's clean energy. But oh boy, it is far from clean. Simon has warnings about how dangerous this energy is and how it's toxic to the workers, but he straight up ignores or denies and keeps going. He throws blame to Miles destroying the bridge, kills off Rick, keeps the Rhino, and gives him the upgrades instead of taking him to prison. And what's even worse is that while Finn is trying to destroy the reactor, while making sure no innocent people are killed, I might add, Simon changes the specs so that it can destroy Harlem. But at least he'll make a profit out of being the victim. What a piece of trash. The same piece of trash just as Drek from the original Ratchet & Clank game. Which corporate assholes, am I right, guys? And you know what? This guy has a lot more credibility. And then we have Finn, who is the Tinkerer. To start off, Finn was one of Miles' best friends, to the point where they are pretty much like siblings. It clearly shows and is given a good amount of time, which makes it hurt so much that Finn ends up being the final boss that Miles has to deal with. All she wanted to do is join the underground group, create the technology, and take out Simon and his company to avenge his dead brother. The problem is that the way she does things is too far. Case in point, she ends up killing the Rhino. Of which, I'm okay with it. Don't at me. However, when Spidey fights the underground to stop their crimes, it did not go well for her. Miles eventually does reveal himself and tries to talk her out of it, but Simon just ruins it when Prowler takes advantage of revealing where Spider-Man and the Tinkerer is going to be at. When Finn is filled with so much rage near the end, she decided enough is enough, and even warns Miles to stay out of it or she'll kill him. It's such a shame of how far Finn is willing to go for revenge, while Miles, being the only Spider-Man in town, is doing the right thing. Miles does try non-violent ways, but either it doesn't work or it ends up backfiring. Miles does fight Finn just as the reactor is activated, but Finn sees how much her plan backfires and how it'll destroy the city. Because she wouldn't listen, Miles has to absorb the energy before the whole city exploded. Finn, in her one final selfless act, redeems himself using whatever tech she has to grab Miles and flies up to the sky, sacrificing herself, telling Miles to let it out. This is some heavy shit, and Finn is such a great villainess. Pretty much one of those villains where you don't want to fight, but have to. But there are two problems I have. A minor one and a major one. Minor. This is the same idea used in Crack in Time, where you have a character you're in good relations with, but later on, they end up being the ones you fight because while they have good intentions, it'll just end in chaos. And when things are screwing up after the fight, they realize the major mistake they've made, and so they sacrifice their lives to make it right. Granted, those games are made by the same company, and I do like it, it just felt like a rehash. Just a bit. But then there's the major problem. After Finn's death, there isn't a scene where Miles or anybody mourns Finn's death. The scene immediately after the death of a best friend, who you would call a sister, just focuses on the fact that Miles just pretty much saves the day and Harlem calls Miles their Spider-Man, and we cut to weeks later. I mean, there is a scene where Miles lands on top and says he'll miss Finn, even calling his mom about how mixed he is about Finn after everything that happened. But you would think there'll be a scene where Miles mourns the loss of Finn. Peter in the 2018 game has a scene where he cries over his aunt's death. In fact, wait a minute, Ratchet has a brief moment where he took in Alice's death, which Miles doesn't have. And no, him being weak and pointing up to the sky muttering her name doesn't count. That's not a very good mood whiplash game. But it's still better than this.
They're counting on me. Probably not you specifically. I think it's a metaphor.
And that was after Peter's death and during a funeral. This stupid movie. Anyway, I should mention that the only time I've ever heard of the Tinkerer before this game was in the Web of Shadows game years ago. And that's pretty much it. Also, it turns out that Finn is a different Tinkerer, who's a female. Which makes me think about how Dr. Octopus in Into the Spider-Verse is pretty much a different Doc Ock that's just a female. So we have two separate villains that are completely different female versions. Who's to win? The game wins. Female Doc Ock is just a nut fascinated with the multiverse stuff. Fights heroes, convinces Kingpin that it's a good thing, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's it. She's just a goon, just like the other monstrosities. And being a female doesn't add a single gosh darn thing. And no fans of this stupid movie taking place in another universe doesn't cut it. It's a lazy excuse. Oh, and guess what? A YouTuber who agrees with me that Into the Spider-Verse is a shit movie on one of my reviews has come up with better ideas of how to make it a better movie and tells me how Lady Ock could be a better character. Finn's Tinkerer, on the other hand, is a perfect example of how to do a different take on a supervillain, which contributes a lot to the story. Oh, and there's the Rhino, who's pretty much a super goon for the hero to fight, just like the monster villains in the movie. However, Rhino wins. Mostly because I like the monster villains, who are just ugly monsters for absolutely no reason. Rhino is a villain that manages to beat Spider-Man, Peter Parker's Spider-Man, on his own at least, and even after getting beat up by Miles, gets upgrades to take down Miles, which he manages to get the drop on Miles. Makes perfect sense. It is a lot more believable than making the supervillains monsters in the movie for no reason. So yeah, even the video game villains, even one or two are one-dimensional or are just super goons, are a lot better than in the movies. And they are one-dimensional. This is like how Steppenwolf in the Justice League movie is just a static character, but the Snyder Cut version is a much better version. Worst problems with the movie's villains? One or two of them are pointless, gender change doesn't add anything, there's a bit too much villains, they are monsters for no reason, Prowler isn't that sharp or smart, it has a stupid shoulder touch that gives my head a tumor, and has the absolute worst villain design ever with the Kingpin! What's the problem with the video game villains? It doesn't really take the time with Finn's death on the Aftermath. And that's pretty much it. I'm gonna get the minor things out of the way before moving on to Miles Morales himself. Now, I don't really have much to say with the side characters. Other than Miles Morales' mother and Genki Lee are much better side characters than the other Spider people and Into the Spider-Verse that does a shit job in teaching Morales. I loved Jefferson in the previous game much better, to the point where when I did a side mission scavenger hunt where he left his final recordings, it was heartbreaking as hell. Gwen Stacy has good punk hair. She's also voiced by Haley Steinfeld. She's interested in Miles, but yeah, that's about it. Also, the actress has been in much better media. Go watch True Grit 2010 remake. Spider-Man Noir, voiced by Nicolas Cage. I don't see him as Spider-Man Noir, I just see him as Nicolas Cage playing a colorblind Spidey just so he can get the money he desperately needs. This guy should just play over-the-top roles a bit more. Also, I would like to have Jonathan Banks voice Spider-Man Noir. Also, he's nothing more than an extended character who can't tell which color it is because Noir is black and white. Get it? Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon made this joke too, and it's also unfunny. Okay, moving on. The people you see and meet on the side missions, one of them being an actual deaf character, It's just like how the old PS2 Ratchet games, its side characters, who doesn't play much role aside from being another quest, and yet they bring so much life into the game. A shop owner who names their cat, well, Spider-Man, a deaf girl, the pigeon dude. There are NPCs and minor characters who barely show up, and yet, ooh, they have a lot more charm and a lot more character and a lot more life than the fucking anime with a mech suit, a cartoon pig, and Nicolas Cage. How do you fucking top Nicolas Cage, who's been a bland character, into the Spider-Verse? How? The animations. This movie just feels like one giant acid trip with an extremely choppy frame rate. Some people argue with me that it's capturing the comic book style. But capturing a comic book style doesn't automatically make it good. For example, Ang Lee's Hulk has been trying to capture a comic book style, and the movie didn't do very good. Also, Ang Lee did the comic book style much better than Into the Spider-Verse. I've also heard that there's an animation class that praises the animation, or that it has won an award. And to that, I say piss off! The PlayStation 5 game animations. Well, you could choose from 30 FPS or 60 frames per second. 60 FPS all day, baby! CGI animations and shit are crisp and clean as hell! And most importantly, 60 frames per second, baby boy! And the PlayStation 5 graphics look clean as hell, man! Don't you drugs, people! I swear to gosh, if the animation and artist classes in college or whatever uses Into the Spider-Verse as an example of good animation, everybody is on drugs, including the animators for the movie. The rap music? Well, Corey X Kenshin made one of the songs at the ending enjoyable as he's vibing, so thanks to him, rap music in-game wins over the movie. Plus, I think the game has a bit more rap from time to time. So, yay? No, I don't know. The game does it better, and it's probably thanks to one or two YouTubers.
Bro, are y'all playing snowball? Y'all having a snowball fight? Do y'all know what's going on?
And finally, we come to the main character himself. A different Spider-Man. One where he gets his own movie and video game. I think the biggest problem with movie Miles is that he is rushed and overpressured as all hell. Some for the wrong reasons. This Miles character just sometimes feels weaker than any other Miles I've seen. When Miles gets bitten by the spider, awkward shenanigans ensue with him not controlling his powers. Now, Amazing Spider-Man movie has a similar issue, but the problem with Miles is that it gets taken up to 11 in a bad way. Grabbing onto birds, slamming into windows with the students somehow not noticing or putting the pieces together. And the only thing that could get him control is by singing a song out loud before slamming onto the ground, which more or less gets him and Peter caught. I don't recall him doing any technical or science stuff like he did in either the 2017 Spider-Man cartoon or the PS4 game. And most of all, he's completely unfunny. And many other problems simply come from the stuff surrounding our main character, like the story and other characters. This whole Spider-Verse idea falls in between of a multiverse story or a Miles Morales story that just so happens to have other Spider-Man from a different world. I think if Gwen and Peter were the only characters in the film, and it didn't have the stupid shit with the two dying due to being in another dimension, I'd probably be okay with it. Disappointing, but it'd be better than just to have 3 spider people that are just extended characters at best. Miles has to take a leap of faith. But in the movie, it just doesn't feel right. And not even Peter in the previous Spider-Man movies ever took a leap of faith. Well, actually, I take it back. In Spider-Man 2, he did. Here, it doesn't work. And Peter just got lucky that he didn't die. And it's also a really funny scene. When Miles did take a leap of faith, I was like, oh. I mean, Miles uses the web shooters and manages to swing just fine. Great. The web shooters work anyway, and he has some experience on how to swing with the webs while in the forest. The only way it could have slightly worked better is if Miles's web are organic like Toby's. Then the leap of faith would make much more sense. Now, in the game, Miles did have to take leaps of faith. More than once, I might add. In fact, Miles took one right off the start. It's been some time since Miles trained with Peter. They fight off criminals and oh no! The spider is broken! Ha 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 ha! What should Miles do? Miles should just run for it like in the movies. He should... No. Miles bravely just stands his ground to fight the Rhino. And even though he's got no experience fighting one of Spidey's longtime villains, it didn't stop him. And when they charge towards each other, Miles unlocks his Venom Blast. Magnificinta! Whatever else Miles did to take a leap of faith, if at all, it's not as good as this scene right here. This leap of faith is flawless. Miles is now, for the time being, the only Spider-Man. And now he's flying solo, boys! He uses his Venom powers against the underground with the high tech, enjoys a nice Christmas dinner with his friends and family, gets a whack costume, even that I had to switch out, helps out people with a new app, blows up a bridge. Okay, that last one isn't good. It is a huge fuck up, let me tell you. But what I love about this Miles is that of course he would screw up big time. He's a novice. He doesn't have the experience. It can bite him in the ass sometimes as well. But he pulls through. And the thing is, Peter said if shit goes wrong, Miles can just call Peter and he'll leave at first flight. But Miles didn't have Peter come back for help. The most amount of help pretty much comes from his family and friends, which is more in line with even how Peter does need help from time to time, and it comes from his friends and family. When the game pushes Miles, oftentimes Miles pushes back, which even ties into the gameplay. Whereas when the movie pushes Miles, Miles just keeps getting his ass beating. It has shitty training from other spiders. Every time video game Miles takes a step forward, movie Miles takes 2 steps back. Movie Miles just has a lot of awkward, unfunny scenes. He runs away more times than not. He has absolutely worst control of his powers. Even more bad when Toby and Andrew first got their powers. And it's even worse with the fact that other Spider-Man just does the very shitty jobs at teaching the kid. Granted, they can't help with the Venom Blast or camouflage, but they could have done better with literally everything else. Video game Miles does not feel rushed at all. Overpressured? It can be the case, but the words of a loved one have much better help than having 5 or 6 spider people rushing your ass. In fact, movie Miles was just damn lucky he didn't die. The game doesn't throw Miles in the middle of an action like 5 seconds after he's got his powers, and he's gotten a much better teacher. The movie is about building up Miles, but it's rushed and overpressured so bad, it just doesn't make for a very good story. I ended up feeling sorry for Miles because of the shit thrown in his face. some very bad, smelly shit thanks to terrible writing. I should know, because in some cases, it's just like how my parents and grandmother pushed me into stuff that I wasn't interested in for quite a while. One of my grandmothers especially. I'm not joking. It's not a nitpick. It's a serious problem that even hurts me on a personal level. And no, it's not a I can relate kind of thing either. The game is about letting Miles fly solo, and he has just unlocked his new powers, even a bit more over time. It's about him finding his best friend, who's trying to take out an evil corporation, and even deals with his uncle later on. The story and characters are organic, to the point where even Miles himself works organically. This game is a good example that while it doesn't have some crazy shit like the multiverse, if you give it a good enough time, a complex villain, and don't have too much characters in it, it'll provide such good content even when you're not playing the game. Movie Miles just feels like a poor dude thrown into the middle of everything and is rushed and overpressured about everything. And that's pretty much a huge problem I have with him. When he beats up the Kingpin and even takes a hit in the final battle, or hell, even takes a leap of faith, it's just plain old luck and a bad case of plot armor. Video Game Miles just feels like a new guy who's getting a chance to fly solo, like how you finally get to drive on your own now that you have your driver's license. There's issues to deal with. Things aren't going to be easy, and Miles doesn't have a lot of experience. But the difference here is that it's actually a lot more organic and feels natural for the most part. From the beginning, PlayStation Parker can drink while hanging upside down, and this Peter has a lot of experience. After everything Miles has faced, now Miles can also drink upside down as well in the end of the game. And his own mother proudly calls his son the SpiderMan. It's also beautiful, and it doesn't feel like luck or plot armor at all. He had a few close calls and could have died, sure, but with Finn, she just doesn't want to do that to her best friend until she gets consumed with so much rage. Movie Miles just got lucky and has plot armor. Video Game Miles has a chance to shine after being a permit driver for quite a while. And boy, does he drive good solo. Also, one final thing. Miles in this movie, he just paints Peter's costume black, leaving the red stuff as his spider symbol. Miles in the game, he gets a wax suit, but later on, he makes himself the outfit instead of painting it. Enough said. Honestly, I hate to be hugely unfair with this movie, Miles, since the majority of the problem is more or less the problems surrounding the character. Only problems aside from that, movie Miles does feel weaker in some areas. But Video Game Miles, everything surrounding him feels a lot more natural. And to be honest, I have no major problems with him. This movie is nothing more than a cash grab piece of shit disguised as art that somehow won an Oscar. The video game, God, it just feels so bittersweet because it's just so good. The gameplay, the story, the characters, the pacing, the action, the comedy, the drama, and the writing, it's not rushed. And for the first Miles Morales video game, it's quite an impressive start, which is why it hurts so much that it's the second Miles Morales story in media. But I am so happy that this game exists, because it just feels like a breath of fresh air. I mean, how is it that a video game can do a much better job telling a story than a Hollywood cash grab of a movie? The major problems I have with the movie is that the story is complete ass, many characters including the Spider-Folk suck, or are pointless or rushed. The comedy is some of the worst I've ever heard and can sometimes ruin a dramatic scene. The villains have a shitty job, with the Kingpin being the absolute worst. Its multiverse concept is not taken as far as it needs to go. A female villain who's a female does not add anything. There are a lot of problems I have with this movie, which I am so shocked it has won an Oscar. And many people call this the best Spidey film ever? How? How does it top the Sam Raimi movies? How does it top the Amazing Spider-Man movies? It does not! It simply does not. And it makes me sick and angry that people think that Into the Spider-Verse is a superior Spidey flick. It just makes me sick. I hate this fucking movie. I hate everything about you. Meanwhile, with the video game, there are two major problems. Just two. One, Peter's face. I'm not gonna wage about that anymore. Plus my throat. I think it's starting to hurt. Number two, not giving the scene of Miles mourning the loss of Finn. And you know what? If they are the biggest problems I have with the Miles Morales video game, I'll take that poison over the billions of problems I have with Into the Spider-Verse. I really hope that this video, or maybe my previous reviews, can help see people the mess that the movie is and how the game is superior. I really do. Well, if you agree with me that the movie is shit and that the video game is a far better Miles Morales story, please like the video and subscribe. If you Spider-Verse fans want to spit all over me, go right ahead. I actually don't mind seeing the amount of dislikes and hates I get from hating the movie. Hell, go download an extension that'll allow you to see the dislikes I had. And feel free to argue with me. But that's just how I feel. Whether my reasons are good or bad, I don't care. It's just how I feel. How I experienced it all. Goodbye.